What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Kanoli Show. Today we've got Yusuf Rios. He's someone I met recently and has a really amazing story, so I'm glad for you guys to hear it. Please welcome Yusuf.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite, Ali.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So right now, I'm a replant. I was born in Philadelphia, but I was in the Midwest for a number of years. So I just came back to the East Coast. I'm here working in the Bethlehem area at Respect Graduate School, and I've been here about a year so far. But I just started working at Respect for about 3 months total. So I'm happy to be back on the East Coast in the PA area.
No, of course. So tell me a little bit about your journey to working at Respect.
So I was in Chicago for a little bit of time. I was working out there, and then I ended up coming back to the East Coast. My family's originally from here, and I was working in Jersey, and then I ended up getting the opportunity to come with Respect. So I already was on my way coming back to PA, replanting to PA.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity presented itself, and I took it. It's an opportunity to work with the community, to work with knowledge, Islamic knowledge in specific, and work with younger people, and work with converts, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you also, I'm assuming, a convert as well? Or
Yes.
How was that journey for you?
It's been a very interesting journey. It took up about half of my life so far. I hit 50 in November. So my journey has been quite interesting. Things are a lot different now for converts coming into Islam than they were before. And there were certain things that were present in the past that were very helpful that are not so present today. But it's been a journey that has been full of excitement. It's been full of fear, changes, struggles, and so on and so forth.
No, of course, it makes sense. And as me personally, someone who's been born Muslim, and I have friends who recently converted, and actually seeing the process happen, it is honestly an amazing thing to watch and see, because you start to see someone asking questions and questions and questions. And then we actually start questioning, what's the purpose of life? What am I doing here? What about this? What about that? And the questions that get asked, you're like, wow, Islam really is for everyone, and it's not like a one size fits all, but it's everyone fits underneath this same doctrine, which I think is amazing. And I would love to hear what you see is different between becoming Muslim nowadays versus back then, like you were saying.
I think nowadays the biggest difference, I would say there's two big differences. One is the issue of community. Back then, communities predominantly were convert communities. At that time, there was an immigrant influx. Immigrants were here as Muslims, but there was not a lot of communities that were formed, by the immigrant community. They were still in the very nascent stages. And nowadays, there's a lot of access to information, whereas before there was not a lot of access to information.
Yeah.
Your information came from the community that you associated with.
Yeah.
Right. So the community was very central for you in your growth and your development, and it was supportive because you had other people. It wasn't like you had one or two. You had a whole community. Everybody was kind of going through that journey, or has been there maybe 20 years, 30 years, or they already started to have children and they were born Muslim, so they seen the process, Then you also had access to the immigrant community, and the immigrant community will bring their understanding in because, they were coming from Muslim countries, and they will have somewhat of, that whole experience of how do I adapt to this, that whole struggle too. Yeah. It was almost like they themselves were experiencing this whole convert process, right? Trying to figure out, where do I belong? How do I make this work? So, but there was, technology wasn't so dominant. The internet wasn't so dominant. It was in its very beginning stages as far as us accessing it as, part of the larger society. So that didn't really affect us as much. We didn't have the social media interference. We didn't have the general internet. What I mean by the internet is just you do your Google searches. So you didn't have that much. There was not a lot of information. So everything was depending on the community and friendships.
Which makes a lot of sense, and that's what Islam is. It's a lot of community, a lot of friendship, a lot of togetherness. And like you were saying with the internet, now you can Google something and find 50 different opinions about the same thing. So then you get more confused, because the more information, the more confusing something could become. But there is information out there to search, but again, it can get confusing. When you're the community, you can see it being practiced real life. You can see the actual applications of whatever you're searching. So I can see kind of how that could make it a little bit difficult comparative to back then.
Yeah, I would say that it's a mixed bag. It has difficulty and has some ease, but I think the real difficulty is in the disconnect. Like, before the human connection was there
Yeah.
to a great extent. Even if it was the issue that you didn't necessarily agree with people, you had to deal with human beings.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're cut off. You're like siloed. You're in your own world. You have to be able to break out of your world and look for people and connect with them in real time.
Yeah.
And for people that are converting or reverting, whatever you want to say, without getting into that, the details of terms, those who are coming into Islam in general, that's a task.
Yeah.
It's already psychologically, there's already a lot of changes which are taking place. And so if you have to find the support group, and if people already are in the mode, sometimes they have difficulty finding friends.
Yeah.
So they may have their own baggage of what that means to them. So that makes it compounds the issue. I don't know if that's clear or not.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I never thought about that because I had a friend who recently converted, but he had me and my brother to guide him. And alhamdulillah, we're two Muslims who live the community. We know all the masjid in the area. We know all these people. We connected him with all the best sources, where to get halal food, where to do this. And like, I thought all of this naturally, like, oh, I'm just helping him out because I don't know all this information. But like you were saying, if he didn't have me or my brother as a resource and had become to Islam himself, or like through YouTube or through anything, where would he have found all of this information right away?
Right.
It was because I was that community access to him. It was so easy for him to like get integrated and like feel comfortable and ask these proper questions and genuinely feel like strong with it. And it's so funny because now like he'll be at the masjid before I get there, and I'm like, wait, like he's here before me. Like I don't have to like, hey, pick him up, or hey, come here and I'll take you here, or here, come here. No, he knows what to do now.
And this is kind of how it was before, in the past. This is not everybody has that experience, And then there's the other dimension of that too, is that depending on people, sometimes if they're not balanced, you can learn how to become imbalanced. That was one of the problems in the past, that you're taking your information, your knowledge from individuals, and so you're basically depending on the level of those individuals, the level of understanding that they have, and so you're being shaped by them. You know what I'm saying? And it may not necessarily always be in the most healthy ways. That's why having good friends with a balanced understanding, and that are integrated into society, you know what I'm saying? Not just, siloed off or isolated.
Yeah.
That's important for converts, because you don't want the religion to be an obstacle to them functioning in society. Yeah. You want them to be able to acquire the values and the teachings of Islam and continue to move and grow in life. You don't want them to be stifled. And there is such a thing as being stifled by religion, you know what I'm saying, in general. It doesn't necessarily have to mean Islam, but people can utilize religion and it doesn't help them to grow. They become antisocial. They don't see the world in the same way that maybe they saw it before. Maybe before they were more open to people. Maybe before they were more excusing of people, and then they become religious and they become way more narrow, way more isolated.
No, I completely know what you mean. It's like sometimes it's like don't become religious so you can be judgmental towards others who maybe aren't as religious as you. And something really beautiful with Islam that I like always loved, and like what my mom and dad always taught me growing up, was that your journey is your own journey. So you might make sins this way or do this wrong, but it's how you bounce back from those sins. It's how you learn from your mistakes. Because if you're not learning from your mistakes, then you're going to keep making that same mistake over and over again. And with Islam, something I realized is that when I wasn't maybe the person I am today or person I was before, when I compare it, I'm like, wait, I got better than I was a year ago. I got better than I was a year ago. And every year that's happened, I look back maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I'm like, wait, I'm so much better I was then. But if you would have told me this is the kind of person I would have been, I would have probably been like, you know what? I kind of believe it. I could assume myself to constantly grow. But again, having that support system is what got me to feel that way. And I never felt the need to like judge myself so harshly or others. So now when I'm where I am today and I see people maybe who are lacking in this that I feel like they could improve on, I don't make them feel judged for it, for not knowing. Because again, I didn't know. So it's like, again, that journey, that process. And with religion, I know, kind of want to note the fact that you said sometimes it could stifle people. And something I love about Islam is my mom and dad, again, always taught me was the deen is in habba habba. So it's like little by little. It's like, don't try to become a religious scholar overnight. So say you're struggling with your 5 daily prayers, then I probably shouldn't come up to you and start talking to you about every hadith in the book, telling you have to follow this, you have to do this, you have to do this. It's like, first, let's focus on the main things, those 5 daily prayers. Let's get that going first. Then, hey, let's worry about maybe eating only halal food. Okay, then let's start working. So it's like a one-by-one journey. Oh, you haven't opened the Quran yet? Read one sentence. You're not asking him to read the whole thing. Read one sentence. And it's like a one-by-one process. So I kind of love that you kind of touch base on like that as well.
Yeah, that's the essence of Islam. The Quran itself was revealed gradually, and that is how the first prophetic community under the Prophet Muhammad, that's how they developed. Alayhi salatu wasalam. They developed gradually. And the Quran itself dealt with the people gradually. Unfortunately, sometimes we lose that principle because, we have the benefit and the blessing of not having to go through that whole gradual experience.
Yeah, we have it all at one point.
It's all at once.
Yeah.
So we want, just because we have it all at once, we want to download it immediately and put it into practice. But that's not how so-called the message was uploaded. It was, slowly until that community embraced that first model community. And it's scary to people because they think some people that are knowledgeable sometimes, or just general community members, when you talk to them in that way, that we have to look at the whole process of our growth as a gradual process. They feel as though that's a compromise.
Yeah.
But we have to realize that we're not in a majority Muslim country. There's different challenges that exist in this environment and in this context. We are developing in an environment where there's a lot of different ideas. And like you said, you can, a person can maybe even violate their own principles. That's not something specific to Muslims. There's a whole genre of study. It's called moral injury. And the idea is when you violate your own principles or you do something against conscience. And so it's possible for that to happen to any one of us in any religion, in any background in this society. But this society opens up to a lot of different choices. In Muslim majority countries, people are influenced by what's in the environment. That doesn't mean that their Islam is perfect, but it means that there's more homogeneity. There's less ability to kind of just deviate from the group so easy.
Veer off outside of what's kind of the social norm.
The social norm, yep.
Yeah.
The social norm is not always representative of Islam, but because it's a Muslim majority country, it's going to be influenced heavily, by Islamic values and so on and so forth. You're going to have that tension of conforming. But we're the reality of how we practice in this country is more individual choice, having to commit your will to implement the practice. It's not just something that's a social norm. So we have to give people that room. Because everybody's developing in different ways, and we have to utilize those Quranic principles, which really are natural to us. As babies, we go through stages. We fall, stages of development, and that's exactly the Quranic, methodology. That's exactly how the Prophet, peace be upon him, that's how he taught the people. But it's, when you have what I call, a traditional understanding of Islam, that is an accumulation of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of understanding. Sometimes we lose contact with how it was that the Quran was implemented to a people that didn't have Islam. It was gradual. You know what I'm saying?
And there was so much patience and growth within the journey. And nowadays I feel like people don't allow themselves to live the journey because with phones and the internet, it's all fast access technology. So if you want something, you could Uber Eats it to your front door. If you want something, you can bring groceries to your front door. If you want to go get something to eat, you can drive 5 minutes, get some food, and come back. It's all quick. There's no sense of time to understand that this might take some time to get this thing I really want.
That's the context of the now, right? The struggle of the now, but also the idea of a traditional society. Everything is packaged for you. You just fit into that tradition. So when you bring that concept to what you're saying, It accelerates the process. There's not a lot of patience with people because it's like, okay, we already have this figured out. This is what you should be doing.
This is the system that works,
Yes.
and it worked for this many people,
Yes.
and it made these many people content. Not
Right.
saying happy or sad, just content.
Right.
That's it. This works.
Yes.
And it's really hard because, again, the more I've gotten into my deen and like Islam and really focusing on everything, and me going back to Egypt sometimes, something I always notice when I'm in America versus when I'm in Egypt or a Muslim country is how there's the call to prayer.
Yeah.
Allah, it's like you hear it and like, oh, it's time to pray, and like then you kind of can tell that there's a sense of camaraderie with everyone. Oh, it's time to pray. Let's get up and pray because we hear it. It's so loud on these giant speakers where you could hear multiple messages in the area because there's so many messages in the area that are all saying the call to prayer. So then internally you're like, like everyone's praying right now. I'm going to pray now with them. And then there's that sense of, again, like you said, community. But in America, obviously, you might have it on your phone on an app that might do it for you.
Yes.
But it's not the same as when you feel this sense of camaraderie. So it's kind of cool that you touch base on that point too.
You're dependent more on your implementation. You know, the social motivation is not there. You know, the peer pressure, even if we say it's positive peer pressure, it's not there.
Yeah.
You know.
No, of course. And I kind of wanted to touch base on kind of like your journey to Islam personally, because again, like you kind of highlight the differences between trying to be a convert nowadays and back then. So I would love to hear a little bit about like your story and how you like found Islam.
Well, the finding of Islam part, it's pretty extensive because it took a certain amount of years, and every time I look back and try to understand the process, I see how there were trinkets of different influences and how it all kind of accumulated, and then for me it became that moment of transformation or coming into Islam. So there's so many different things that I can say throughout so many different parts of my life that had an impact on that. But I will say that eventually one of the things that led me to be Muslim, I was actually studying to be a priest for 2.5 years, and I had a childhood, in which pretty much I grew up in a religious family, but I had my bumps, especially in my early teens. But because of that religious grounding in my family, it didn't allow me, in that consciousness that was instilled in me, didn't allow me to go too far.
Yeah.
Because it was ingrained in me. So, you have a sense of right or wrong.
Like those morals. Your set-based moral guideline wasn't too crazy to be like you're all on one end or not. You were kind of like average individual. You're going through life.
Right. Yeah, you have that moral base. Whether you agree with it or not at that stage in life is a different question, but you're kind of just going with it because it's what you know. And so that helped me a lot. It helped me. So by the time I was in my late teens, I had a clear understanding I just don't want to veer out too far as to what's going on in society that may contradict my morals. Kind of want to stay where I was taught. I want to continue to develop. But there was in that whole journey of spirituality and becoming religious consciously. I was becoming religious. I was choosing, to become religious, and I was choosing to become religious in the Catholic religion because that's what I predominantly had grown up with. But that had opened me up to, thinking, about religion, and it had opened me up to different ideas. It had opened me up to being influenced by different ideas, and that was part of the journey, not the whole journey, but of how I came into Islam. But I started to be open to ideas that were coming from Muslims, some questioning on, some of my beliefs. And that eventually led me to say, well, I need to investigate this further. But I didn't just drop my religion. What I did is decide to go deeper into my religion. So I was already grounded somewhat in it, and I continued to go deeper, and eventually that led me to study to be a priest. And that's why I say it's a very long journey. But one of the things that attracted me to Islam was that I already had a belief in the prophets, peace be upon them, the same prophets pretty much that you find in the Bible and in the Christian and Jewish religions. And there were some fundamentals that were the same, like for instance, belief in hereafter,
Yeah.
the day of judgment idea.
Jesus, Moses,
Yeah,
Abraham,
yes,
Mary. Like we all believe the miracle that Jesus was born,
right,
but without a father.
right,
That Mary, it was basically a blessing from God where Mary got pregnant. So they didn't have any.
right.
So it's like, so it's kind of cool, like, to think about that. You know what I mean? Like how like Isa literally was created from God, but then the whole argument of then is God have a son, but then obviously in Qul Ahad say no, Allah doesn't beget or have a child. But then in Christianity or Catholic belief, it's like, oh, that's the Son of God.
Right.
So that is God.
Right.
And then it's like, that's where sometimes I feel the contradictions could come up to play. Where then you start thinking about it, you're like, I'm not too certain. Like, I'm not too certain. So then you start asking questions.
The Trinity idea, which is what you're alluding to, is probably one of the most complicated issues in Christianity to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Without we're mature enough without having to bash, but it's a complicated concept to work with. I mean, you can work with it on a spiritual level, but intellectually it becomes complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Somehow you can accept it spiritually. People have some way of working through that, but intellectually, it creates some issues for people.
Mm-hmm.
And even sometimes, even on the spiritual level, sometimes, like, who do I pray to? Do I pray to God the Father? Do I pray to God the Son? Do I pray to God the Holy Spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to reckon, if you're okay with that spiritually, sometimes you have to work through that. You have to reconcile that, intellectually. Well, are they three or are they one? Are they all the same? And like I said, it's not a point of bashing. It's a point of it is a complicated doctrine to work through.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Bible itself, the idea of the oneness of God, they have it's kind of like the Shahada or the testimony of faith. Hear ye, O Israel, the Lord your God is one.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
That's in what the Christians call the Old Testament. And then there's the idea of don't worship any other gods except me, which is in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
And don't create images, that's within the Ten Commandments, graven images. And so you have this idea that there's the oneness of God.
Yeah.
You have this idea that idolatry or setting up partners or worshiping something other than God or giving worship to something that is other than God is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
That's Islam.
Yeah,
that's Islam. So we
and
don't.
It's kind of such a strong similarity,
right?
And that's something that I always tell people. It's like I think people, if they looked at the similarities between like the three Abrahamic religions, they'd be like, wait, these are so similar. It's like because it's the same God that they pray to. It's the same idea of that oneness of God, and it's so like interesting. Where growing up, I'd be like, oh, you pray to Allah. I'm like, God, yeah, and it's like, what do you mean your God's not the same as my God? But then I'm like, is there more than one God like that I don't know of that you knew of? And like I remember like when I was younger, it was hard for me to like grasp the idea that people believed theirs was different than mine, or so you know what I mean?
How was that experience?
It was weird actually, because like growing up, like obviously you're not as informed when you're a kid, when you're like early teenager, right? You're 12, 14 years old, and people are talking about Jesus as God. And obviously I go home to my dad and mom, like, hey, like, can I ask you some questions about Christianity? Can I ask you guys questions about Judaism? And for me, like, I kind of like always ask questions growing up. So I'd always ask, like, so why Islam? Like, what's the point? Like, well, why are we Muslim? Why are we right? Because like everyone thinks they're right in life, So I was pretty intuitive at a young age to ask those questions, which I was really grateful about. But when I would talk to people after that, like, my dad was kind of explaining to me, he's like, Allah again just means God, but in Arabic. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I believe in God. Yeah, you believe in God. And I remember thinking like, because I almost felt like gaslighted basically to think that I wasn't believing in the right God. By like, again, because when you're not in a Muslim majority place, the culture, the community around you all believe in this thing. So then you think that, okay, so if everyone believes in this thing, but I don't, why am I standing alone on this topic? When you're growing up.
This is why we say that first generation Muslim experience is not too far off from where the converts are.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that you all that are born into Islam, you have that you have that cultural backdrop, that support. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that makes it a little bit different. But the questioning and the thinking, and then the, where do I fit in this questions, or how is this? Why do I believe this? Or
Yeah.
that is in many ways the same experience that the convert has. So we can end at the same place, and that is, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. We're choosing.
Yeah.
We're choosing, and we're reflexive about. We're choosing our practice. We're choosing our religion, and we're reflexive about what it is that we believe. It's somewhat examined. Now everybody doesn't have the same level of examination or thinking about it. In other words, considering it.
Yeah.
But it is something that we're doing. That's not necessarily the case to that in that same way. That is not necessarily the similar experience of what's going on or what was going on overseas. They would just accept Islam and that's it. Not everyone, of course, but that's the general tendency because that's the norm. But now with globalization, I think all of us are going through a similar experience.
Because there's so much access to knowledge and information that you could ask any question to Google. This is the same way. And things, what you see on the internet, what's the most popular on the internet, isn't usually the Muslim content that talks about Islam. It's usually kind of like, I would say, like, I wouldn't say just bogus content, because there's obviously good content out there to consume, but a lot of it is very mainstream. All the mainstream stuff isn't what's positive. It's like negativity spreads faster on the internet than positivity.
I wanted to ask you a question on that. When you talk about content, the production of content and where things are at as far as the digital cultural world. What do you think is the role of us producing content?
So I think that, like, something for me that kind of got me more inspired into it and thinking about it more realistically is that there's so much what I would call personally bad content out there that doesn't sit with my morals and values that gets promoted. So, for example, things that go viral on the internet mostly are hypersexualized content, where it's like, even in the music and then the culture, the dancing, everything that it is, it's promoting this sexuality. It's promoting this hypersexuality of oneself. And again, no judgment to people in their journeys or what they're going through, but when you constantly see that all the time thrown in your face, you then become desensitized to a lot of these things, like you said, and it becomes normal. So because everyone's doing it, you might not even question it because it's so normal to see this thing or to hear about this. And then the content that spreads faster on, for example, the Twitters, the Instagrams, all these popular social media platforms is negative content. So it creates this gossiping, it creates this backbiting, it creates this, again, more of this negative environment. And that's stuff that gets promoted more because it's easier to share negative stuff. So when you see people talking positively, it's like it doesn't go as viral. It doesn't hit the main page. So that's kind of something that I noticed as like someone who's like grew up with technology all around them. And obviously studies prove this, that negative content spreads almost five times faster, or if not more, than positive content. So then to me, as someone who wants to, I guess, talk about Islam, talk to people about different topics of life, I want to make sure that we're pushing a positive message rather than a negative message. And if we talk about things that, again, like are, I guess, like anti, like mainstream, I would say sometimes, then I'm not going to do it in a way where I'm talking down on others or do it in a way that's constantly informative. And that's kind of like my goal personally with creating what we'd call content. But again, it's more along the lines of trying to do something positive for the world for the sake of Allah, rather than because when you see all the content, you're like, I wish someone would do this. So it's like, then why don't you just do it? That's kind of, again, like my thinking behind it. But I kind of wanted to go back to kind of like your journey, because I remember you saying you're studying to be a priest and doing all these things. So kind of like, how did you go from studying to be a priest and like going so hard into it and then doing that?
I had went because my early teenage years, I'm a child of the 80s. In the 80s in this country, in the U.S., there was a lot of transformation, especially here on the East Coast. I can't speak for other parts of the country in the same way, but I've heard that it's a similar experience. Our environments were flooded with drugs. They were flooded with drugs and then guns and so on and so forth. So a lot of these neighborhoods in large cities, they became war zones almost like overnight. And so that created a very negative environment on multiple levels. It was not only a mental issue, it was not only something that was, in your mind, but it was something that you were seeing, you know what I'm saying? And so basically, to sum it up, the social breakdown was serious. And the social breakdown was accompanied also by, cultural transformation. There was, even internally in this country, there has been a lot of struggle within this country in my life experience as to what should dominate in the public. You know what I'm saying? And there has been a struggle between diversification, diversity, and this means involving people of different cultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
But also the whole idea of, diversity of morality. And so the two don't always equate. Some people try to equate the two, but they don't always equate. It doesn't mean just because you're diversifying culturally that there's a moral breakdown. In other words, you know what I'm saying?
So you can do both of have diverse and different cultures and stuff, but then still stay on your moral guidelines of what you want to achieve.
Right. And I'm saying as a society.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the moral breakdown of society because you have different people from different cultures.
Okay.
Or even different religions. You know what I'm saying? There is a certain standard that can be achieved. But when you start talking, like, I remember, like, there was a lot of attempts to put, like, semi-pornographic content on public television. Like, Canada was doing that way back. You know what I'm saying? And here, there's always been that resistance. And so that was kind of the struggle that you began to see.
Yeah.
And that was and some of that was a carryover from the 60s. The 60s was a time where there was a lot of questioning of morality, a lot of questioning of the culture, and it had its positives and negatives. But of course, have the idea of the sexual revolution. So the 70s became like somewhere where all of this stuff, all of this questioning that was taking place in the 60s and the rebellion, it became packaged. And on top of that, you had the impact of the war in Vietnam, and so you had a lot of transformation in society. So the 80s, we just inherited all of that.
Yeah.
We just inherited all of that, and it was just where the economy was at. Some cities, it just wasn't a good place. And so that created an environment which really had an impact on a lot of us growing up. Even though it was a time where society you felt that it was way more stable than it is now. The U.S. felt way more stable. The jobs felt more stable, even though there were issues. The concept of retirement was very clear.
There was still some sort of security.
Yeah,
like
the security.
Sense of security.
Yes,
but nowadays, again, it just feels like we're teetering on the brink of just
social fallout. Yeah. So you had that kind of beginning feeling of social fallout at a different level, but it wasn't like what you feel now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so that caused me to question.
Okay.
That caused me to question. It caused me to question. It caused me to really examine things, my morality, and that's how I became a little more religious. So I had to say that I also had because of that background, I had this idea, well, the end of the world is coming. It was very, I would say it was very imbalanced. And sometimes when we become religious, we can adopt that just because society is posing us with challenges. We instead of like what you said earlier about the whole issue of producing content, taking responsibility, we put it out there and we say, well, it must be the end of the world.
Yeah, it's like, oh, the signs of end times. I read this and I know this and all these things. Even in like Christian like beliefs as well. I remember kind of talking to a Christian friend who's very religious, and like we're having a good discussion. And we're saying like a lot of the end time signs are here. Like, and then I was talking to a friend who's Sikhi, so it's like he practices Sikhism. He's Punjabi, and he was explaining to me, he's like, we believe it's like all these signs are here too. So it's like all these different religions and cultures are all believing like, yeah, like we're getting there. Like there's a lot of these signs, and it's so interesting because it's like even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had so many like prophecies that are basically all coming true. And out of like, they say there's like 100 something. I think like there's only like a couple left until it's like then the major signs start. And the major signs are also ones that are very synonymous with Christianity as well. Like Jesus will rise. So it's like and as Muslims, we believe like that he would, Imam Mahdi will fight the Dajjal, which is the Antichrist, and like we have those similar strong beliefs with Christianity as well. So it's like when you start talking these things, it's easy to be like, oh well, the world's ending. Why am I even trying in school? If the world's gonna end, then why am I even doing this? And it's
Right.
like it's so easy, like you said, to do that, to just play victim. But the hard thing is in life to do. Is to take
I wouldn't say
responsibility.
that. I wouldn't say the, not to be contrarian position, but I wouldn't say play victim, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't take that route, because in the liberal conservative debate, this is so much that comes out. I think
Yeah.
that it's a genuine concern, right? I think it's a genuine concern. I think that us as Muslims, though, we have to be careful, because as Muslims, Islam encourages a hopeful stance.
Yeah.
And then there's the idea that no one really actually knows, in principle, when the
day of judgment is.
the
Only
day of
God
judgment
knows.
is going to be. Only God knows. Then we have the concept of, that we're pushed to the idea of tajdeed, or revival. That we should be committed to the process of reviving. We should be, like what you're saying, well, take up the responsibility. You know what I'm saying? Some people say, well, that's not playing the victim card. But yes, but I don't want to get into that whole concept of victimization, because people have a genuine concern, and they actually may not know how to work the situation. It's not that they're victim, they're playing the victim card. Is that they're actually victimized by the conditions.
They don't even know where to go next.
Yes, they don't know where to go next.
Situation with the information they learn, they're like, wait, so now what?
Yes,
and it's like this sense of like, I wouldn't say limbo, but kind of like you don't really know where to go next.
I would say that it's limbo.
You'd say limbo?
I would say that limbo. I think it's limbo. I think there's confusion. I think that it's easy to tell someone, just pick up your pants, and by the bootstraps.
Yeah,
and
get it going.
Busy,
Yeah,
and get it going. And that's where we have to be balanced. That as Muslims, we acknowledge that that is a tough situation to be in. But what and as Muslims, we're given an orientation.
Yeah.
Right. We're given an orientation, and that orientation, like you said, it allows us to move gradually. It allows us to say, well, you know what, I messed up. I can go gradual. You know what I'm saying? And I can regroup myself, and I can rebuild my foundation.
Yeah.
And that's the sense of repentance, or that's the sense of, renewal, and so on and so forth. But, when I came into Islam, so I as a Catholic, I went into the study to be a priest with that mentality. And then so as a Muslim, eventually I became a Muslim, because one of the things that I saw in Catholicism was that if I was going to be a priest, how was I really going to be involved in the community? I'm still isolated. Yes, I can serve the community. That was great. That was awesome. I could serve the community, not have to worry about income, nothing. Just service. It was awesome. But then I was like, yes, but you're really living separate from the community. And what about family? What about, dealing with society? Because when you go to be a priest, there is this concept that you are rejecting society. You're opting for church society, which is an isolated world.
As a priest, are you allowed to have children or no?
No, not a Catholic priest.
No, that's what I was thinking. I remember there's probably like a difference.
Yes. So for me, all of those things came into consideration. So, and other things were coming up, like the crisis in the church. It was beginning to manifest itself on multiple levels. And so I eventually decided to become Muslim, and I took, and I did it. I transferred to the university dorm, because I was living in a seminary, but I was going to the university at the same time. I was in a dual program. And in the university dorm is kind of where I worked some of that stuff out. What do I do? Like, now I don't have my religion. How do I balance things out? And then so when I decided to become Muslim, that's why I said it's a long process.
Yeah.
But when I decided to become Muslim, I encountered a community that was struggling too. I encountered a community this was like pre 9/11, and a community that was heavily impacted by the war in Afghanistan. And the war in Afghanistan was basically, you're talking about the Soviet threat.
Yeah.
I got to live to watch some of the end of the Soviet threat. Like your age doesn't, see that. There was this clear fight between Russia and the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
in the globe.
Yeah.
And so
That's like world powers.
yeah,
and
world power
globalization.
struggles. Yes, and the globalization is a little different, but it was similar to that. But it was definitely more, more of a different type of ideological struggle that was being fought in the world. And so the Muslims were not free of being influenced by that. And so you had this environment where people were trying to figure out what is Islam and how do we practice, here in the U.S. itself.
Yeah.
People were coming from other countries or people were taking up Islam here. And, there was, and remember, you're talking about a generation influenced by the 70s.
Yeah.
And the 70s in this country was a place of, where there was, civil unrest, just like in the 60s.
Yeah.
So there was, this revolutionary type of mindset, that's what it was. And then you had this heavy influx of immigrants coming in with different ideas and different ambitions that led to a lot of confusion in what was our spaces. I won't say because we didn't have a lot of masajid. But, the African Americans definitely, they had their institutions, their masajid, but there was not a lot of masajid. That's why I don't want to say masajid across the board. And in the African American communities, those communities tended to be really clear on what they were following. But other communities, like for instance, the MSA, I used to go to an MSA. It was like you had all kinds of ideas. It was very confusing. All kinds of ideas of how to practice and so on and so forth. So that led me, my experience in being a Catholic and studying to be a priest, which has some formal education and some structure and discipline, it led me to question whether that approach that was being taken was the right approach. And eventually that pushed me to want to go study because I wanted to remain Muslim. I said, I can't live with that level of confusion that I saw in the community, right? And so that eventually led me to go to Egypt, to go to study in Egypt. And one of the things that I was looking for was a place where I can find some balance, between, how do you work out the Shia Sunni thing? How do you work out these different madhabs, the idea that you can practice in different ways? How do you work out this, whether you're focused on the sunnah or you're focusing on your heart? How do you work out all these ideas? These, are you part of this an Islamic movement or not part of an Islamic? All these things were coming up, and that was the struggle. And so as a convert, if you came into that, part of the initiation into the Muslim community was you had to survive the madness in that regard.
Yeah.
Which that's very different than what you find in the Muslim world. You don't find that level of idea clash.
Like chaotic energy.
Yeah, chaotic energy. You don't find that in that sense. Things are a lot more stable. You have leadership in a different way. Even if there's differences, it's a lot more. A place like Egypt, the discourse is way higher. Because you have institutions of learning and you have Islamic research taking place at a higher level. And because of the generations of scholarship and the culture being influenced, it's at a higher level, even if the people are not studying. There was a statement that was made some time ago that Kulthum was a person that was a part of a Sufi group at one time, and then she became a singer. They say that, and she became very influential in Egypt because of her music.
She was wildly popular. I know, like my dad and my mom, like their generation, like went crazy about like her aura, her singing, the way she sang, and like she encompassed an audience the way like I would even argue like she was like basically like the Michael Jackson or the Elvis Presley of Egypt for like years and years and years.
Yes. And that content, you talk about content on the cultural level, it kept their understanding at a high level. And then the Egyptians were very good with media. So they had their they had their Quran channel, and it was a full-blown program. Like they produced content. You know what I'm saying? Like there was educational content. There was just listening to the Quran content. And so that created an environment. You know what I'm saying? That created a nice environment. That environment, is different than what I was encountering. You know what I'm saying?
Like in the States.
Yeah, in the States, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so people in that type of environment, they're a little more okay with their identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're not going through that's why you hear in the Muslim American community, there's always this issues of our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately, in this society, there's this concept of identity politics.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
And then you're pandering towards the identity of this person and this person. And it's like, and you said, it becomes more confusing. And the more confusion, the more chaos. The more chaos, the more you don't know what's right from wrong, the more that moral guideline gets stretched.
Yes, or you can have the moral guideline, but you find yourself contradicting your own self.
Mm-hmm.
But you have it as a base. You're not questioning it, but how you implement that, that becomes a struggle.
Yeah, that becomes the hard part.
That because it's like, and I remember when I was going to the university, there was a young brother. His father had him on the track to become a doctor. And so he was very strict with him. He's a Palestinian brother, very strict with him. He was in the ROTC. He was like, so he had his physical discipline, and he was in pre-med.
Like he was on like a mission, like a grind to get to this goal.
Yeah, he was on a mission. He couldn't deviate. And I remember he used to tell me, I'm so stressed out. And then he was in college. He was like, I wish, basically I can have, a girlfriend to get married, but my father won't let me, get married. I have to become a doctor first and this and that. He said, and everyone else, what they do when exams are up, they go hit the party or they go drink. They do the binge drinking thing. He said, I can't do that. He said, I don't have really any outlets. You see what I'm saying? And so that's so you find that
he'd have the release of the stress. There was no
Yes.
stress release. And thing is, his physical stuff with ROTC should be a stress release, but that's not stress relief. That's like a grind.
Yes.
That's a high level of physical intensity. That's not really stress relief. Even for me, sometimes stress relief for me is even just going on a walk. I have a skateboard, maybe I'll just cruise around a little bit, just for 20 minutes, not even a crazy amount of time, just something to do to relax me. But if no part of my day had any of that relaxation at all, I don't know what you'd just be living in this basically you shake up a Coca-Cola can until it pop,
right,
everything bursts.
And that's the struggle that a lot of people have. That's the struggle that I had. That's why I decided to go study. You know what I'm saying, and try to work these things out. Through knowledge.
Yeah.
Try to try to figure out how to make it work through knowledge, and I think it was very helpful. You know what I'm saying? I think it helped me a lot. It definitely was part of my journey.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I have to tell you, if I didn't take those steps, I don't know if I would have remained Muslim. Because the knowledge piece helped me so much to see Islam on so many other different levels, and to realize how unhealthy sometimes some decisions people make with regard to their own lives and their own practice. So the knowledge piece has helped me to regroup. The unfortunate part is that it took me so long. It took me so long. It took me like a couple decades to work that out, which is something that I don't think that we as a community should maintain that type of environment. We your friend, like you were saying, they converted. He has you, and you were saying you had your parents, and there was a way that you worked through things and try to keep that balanced outlook.
And the way for the knowledge to spread, honestly, pretty quickly, where if my brain is a vault of these informational things that are needed to be asked, and I knew it, then I could help someone because I know all these things. And for me, I tend to be better at more storytelling things, where I can explain a situation in my life and where this situation is prevalent, or Islamically, this is how I dealt with this situation, or this is what we believe about this situation. And hey, here's a story about when I went through something like this that tested me in this exact light. And that's kind of how I like talking about Islam a lot. And it was funny because my brother is very in the Quran it says this, in this it says this. He's more of
textual.
The textual. I'm more of the you said how do you balance it?
Yes.
And it's cool because me and my brother as a balance for him was perfect. Because he would basically ask my brother a very simple, straight questions, or Quranic questions. Then he would kind of ask me more spiritual questions, where it's how about this feeling? How do you go through this? How do you go through that? And it was kind of cool to see how with me and my brother as his mentors to Islam and support system to Islam, and all kudos to him, all credit to him, because he asked amazing questions, and obviously all praise to Allah too to like guide him on this journey too, because like I'm telling you, it was one of those moments where like I'm standing next to him in a tarawih prayer, and I'm standing next to him like while I'm praying. Obviously, you're supposed to be have khushu and like focus on the prayer, but like I couldn't help but smile because I'm standing next to him in tarawih prayer. But if you told me 2 years ago I'd be standing in a tarawih prayer with him, I wouldn't have believed it. And it was one of those moments in life where you're like, wow, like this is how important it is to inform people properly, how to be patient with people, how to like have that support system, like you're saying. So it's kind of awesome that you touch base on that, because for me, like I visually saw exactly what you're talking about in my own life. So it's kind of
Yeah,
cool to see that.
the whole mentor process, that's taking place all the time. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us, when it comes to people at different levels, sometimes even as parents, it's the same thing. We have that role with our children. It's important that we learn how to play that role well,
Mm-hmm.
because we're influencing somebody's life. And so it's important that we bring to them, like what you're talking about earlier about messaging. It's important that we bring, positive messaging that's healthy,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can grow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because these are challenging times. I don't like to say the last day, but these are challenging times, very challenging
Mm-hmm.
times. You know what I'm saying? And really anything can tip things in different directions.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can say something to a person, it could be a mental health issue. Something socially can be problematic if you just if they're not addressed. It can, like we saw that with during COVID with Black Lives Matters.
Mm-hmm.
Certain issues that are not addressed,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not dealing with them. It could be the reason for leading to societal disruption. So the same thing with family life. Husband and wife, they don't address certain things, it tip over.
It festers this
Yeah.
like toxic environment if nothing is mentioned.
Right.
And it's so important too that you mention that, because something that I've been working on focusing in life now and like noticing in life is when there's issues, when there's problems, there's moments when, yes, you talk about that issue and that problem. There's also times where you kind of just bite your tongue, wait until the right time to mention it, and then mention it.
Right.
So it's like always knowing that balance, like you're saying, like how to say this to someone. The way I say something to someone
Yes.
matters more than even, and when I say it to someone matters more than even what you're saying. Because it's like my dad always like, Ali, the method, Ali, the way you say something matters. And it's like, obviously when like a father gives you advice, like okay dad, right? But then when you really start to take it into practice, you're like, wait, like it really does matter. Like I noticed that, and say I'm debating with someone, if I'm yelling back because they're yelling at me, then we're ever gonna get anywhere. But if I'm calm, cool, composed, and I'm like, hey, okay, let's talk it through. One by one, I kind of notice how their energy starts to calm down, and then we talk it through, and then done, boom. So it's like, wait, so because I was able to keep my cool, my patience, the sabr, like, and then see where the end goal was, like, this is what I actually wanted, and it's what happened because I was able to be calm, be cool, composed, just play the game, play the long game, instead of snap right back. That's kind of cool to see, like, again, like, you always kept talking about balance, and it's like how balance is in everything that we do.
Yes. Yes. And we have to realize that in our relationships with each other, we have to ask, what are we bringing to each other?
Mm-hmm.
That's in every relationship, and that's part of, I think, how we contribute to the world.
Mm-hmm.
We leave an impact, on people's lives, and we have to be, I don't want to say calculative, but I want to say, strategic for good.
Yeah.
And like what you were saying, knowing when is the time to say things. That's why the concept of emotional intelligence is very important. There's also spiritual intelligence. When learning how to take these lessons, of spirituality and apply them to life situations and emotions, and learning, how to deal with emotions and how to deal with people and maybe where they're coming from. But there's no doubt that the conversion process is a very destructive and disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sensitive time in a person's life, just like teenage years, become like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of change that's taking place at one time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not necessarily destruction for the worse or for the bad, if it's done in the right way. Just like there's sometimes the surgical procedures that have to be done in order to save a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes in that transformation process, It's the same thing. There's some pain that comes along with that, but it is for a good end with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it comes to converts, we have to pay attention to that. They're in a vulnerable state. It's not that they're weak, is that because they're like in that state of when you go to a campus for the first time, you don't know anything that's going on. You know what I'm saying? And you're kind of like depending on people a little bit.
Yeah, like your training wheels are still on. So it's like hard to like let them off real quick. And it's like anytime there's something a new change in life, because obviously as humans, change is hard for everyone.
Right.
If anything changes, so your routine is every day you wake up at 6 and do these 10 things, and one day you get up and you don't do those 10 things.
Yes.
The rest of your day is gonna feel a little awkward, even if it's that amount of change. It matters.
Yes.
So now imagine changing your entire spiritual beliefs, your realm of understanding of God. That's intense.
Yes.
So then if that big change happens in your life, you need that support system. You need that training wheels at a time and understand that they could be vulnerable, like you're saying, but not vulnerable like weak, but vulnerable that they're very malleable in this moment.
Right.
So those are very formidable moments in someone's life when a lot of change is happening, which is why, again, like having a support system in life, no matter what it is, whether it be religious, whether it be being a convert, or just having like a brother, a friend, a sister, someone there to support you through everything you're going through is important to have. So that's, again, keeping good company.
Yeah, even the university years are like that. Your university years are probably the most important years in your life. Because you're talking about now. You're moving out of that childhood realm.
Becoming a young adult.
You're a person that's making decisions, and all of those decisions are going to have a massive impact. In terms of it is a middle point of life for a person that's like 20 something years, 30 years. There's different midpoints I like to see, but this is a time period where what you're going to do with your time. What happens with your economic situation to a certain extent. You're deciding that you're playing with ideas. University environment can be dangerous too, because it's an environment where you can be exposed to a lot of ideas and not know how to work through that stuff. That's why you find some people, they going through mental health breakdowns on campus because it's so stressful. Then there's the issue of relationship building. Not only with friends, but also with a partner that you may spend the rest of your life with, or a good portion of your life, because nowadays divorce is so common.
But especially in the States.
Yeah, and especially in the States. It's so you have this reality that this university time period, it's a conversion period too. I'm trying to give you these different insights to say that what converts go through, we are going through in different levels, in different ways. You know what I'm saying? It's just that they're focused on one part, and that's the religious part. You know what I'm saying? But we're also seeing that, teenagers are going to that. We're also seeing, university students are going to that.
Because you're still going through life.
Yeah, you're going through life and transformation. You're going through change periods, and through life. So that's where I think the common ground is at, imagine going through conversion and being in the university.
Yeah, it's like so much change, so intense, and like it's also exciting because like when you start to notice all of that, you're like, wow, like life can be so intense for some people, where it's like I'm so great. Again, I always say like I'm so grateful for being born Muslim, but then even for me, like I had to fall in love with Islam myself, not just because my mom and dad were, so I had to be.
What part of Egypt are you guys from?
Alexandria.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah, the North Coast. Yeah, which I love. I've always loved the
Alexandria is a whole different culture. I lived in Cairo.
Cairo is so crowded. It's intense. Everything's moving so fast, and especially like it's really unfortunate now because like the wealth disparity in Cairo is getting really bad, and obviously because like the dollar and like the Egyptian pounds like price equivalent is starting to get even worse. So it's like it's scary as someone who lives in the States, and like when you see your home country that even though you didn't live there most of your life, you still have the sense of feeling like, dang, like that's so much harder for like the Egyptians that are there, and like I personally have this privilege where I'm here in the States to make money in American dollars, right? Then you go there, it's like, oh, when I vacation in Egypt, I can be a baller, I can spend money all I want. But then it's like you can. Then I think about how all the Egyptians that are hurt because of that same big feeling. So sometimes like when I think about like that, when I go back and I see Cairo, I see certain places, I just get so like anxious and like have this anxiety come out where it's like I want to be able to help as many people as I can, you know. So it's like inshallah, like
That's
Allah
beautiful.
can bless us to like give more and do more, but
Inshallah,
like,
yeah.
but yeah, no, I'm more of definitely like an Alexandrian coastal waters kind of person. Like I love that when you go to Egypt, like you put your toes in the sand, you look down in the water, you can see your feet through the water. You know, like nowadays here, when you go to the beach, you're not really going to the beach as an American here. You kind of go for the casino life that's on the boardwalk, and then you walk and eat food. They don't really go in there to enjoy the water. Like I remember going to like the Red Sea and like diving down with like these snorkeling goggles and seeing all this coral, and it's like to me like that's amazing, that's incredible, that's swimming to me. But nowadays here it's like, oh, let's hop in this cold water at the Jersey Shore, but really they're there because they want to go to the casinos and gamble and stuff. And as a Muslim, it's hard to like fit in this culture, this society's culture, you know. So again, when I think about Egypt, that's what I always think about, like just that intense. When you were there, how long did you stay, you said?
Did 5 years. You know, I visited Alexandria. It was a different cultural reality, completely different. You know, it's a different experience.
What was some of your favorite foods when you were in Egypt?
Kosheri,
Uh,
you know,
you definitely were in Cairo.
food, tell me, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like full tomaya. It's for me like every time I go to Egypt, my favorite things is like to get fish, like
yeah,
from
yeah,
Alexandria,
yeah.
because like
That's Alexandrian, yeah.
so fresh, you know.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
and they grill it right in front of you, like
Meshwi, yeah.
they're right there, and like you eat it like lemon. They give you appetizers.
You
Like
do know that in Jersey they have a spot like that.
really,
Yeah, Jersey they have a spot uh, between Jersey City and Union City. They have
you're gonna have to give me
the Egyptian spot.
the
Yeah.
address and stuff so I can get my dad to be the tester, because my dad's like super loves it. Like he's
No, I
like,
went there with the Egyptians. It's legit.
it was legit. All right,
Yeah.
sweet. Definitely let me know after. It'd be cool to take my dad there. But no, I kind of want to go on and just kind of talk about like something that you're personally passionate about, you know? So something that maybe obviously like going through your Converse store and everything, but I know like you were kind of saying that you're very passionate about life. So can you kind of give me like I guess a small description of like what about life makes you like so passionate about it, you know?
I really love the people component. I love enjoying time with people.
Mm-hmm.
But authentic connection. For me that's a big deal. So it's a massive thing for me. Just connecting with people. For me that shows the miracle of life. I like simple things. That I like. Nature for me is like amazing. For a lot of times, especially environments that are not so polluted. Now we live in a time period where that has become serious issue.
It's hard to find like just natural things to see and enjoy.
Yeah, where it's natural and you find that pollution has not destroyed the beauty. That's what I mean. The word I'm looking for is the beauty of nature, where you can experience it, and when you experience that, it's like seeing a miracle.
Yeah.
It's just like so amazing. How that exists. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about seeing a new generation not have to go through the same struggles. Overcome some of the emotional challenges. That gives me a lot of hope. And the to see the growth of the Muslim community in a healthy way. That's something that excites me. I think that during the Black Lives Matters, to see the different challenges that the society is going through, but to see that there's people that still care.
That there's an effort to be like, you know what, like there's a problem, and like we're gonna stand up and try to be a voice for the problem.
Right, and to be honest with you, that's on every front. Like I've learned that the polarization that exists in the society, there's somewhere, I'm not going to say always a middle way, but there's truth on all sides, and so it shows the health of a society. You know what I'm saying? I was
that
happy.
There's different perspectives, that there's ways to have different ideas and different ideologies. But I think the biggest thing is being able to listen to one another about these different ideas. Because me and you can sit here and talk for 20 hours, 50 hours in life, but then how many of those hours will we agree 100%? We shouldn't be 100%. We should have differing opinions about things. That's normal. But I feel like nowadays people only look for people that agree with them on everything. But that's very dangerous, like you're saying, because then it polarizes us.
Right, and I think that some of the things that took place, showed the strength of the society to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the worries that I had before, like I wasn't one of those types of people that was like, oh, let me go get this gun, because society's about to collapse. That was a big, I was very concerned about at that point about where everybody was going
Mm-hmm.
in that direction, because there was that was the solution for
You have to
people.
start thinking about those types of things
Yeah,
naturally.
yeah,
It's like when you see things in life happen like that, you're like, okay, like is this the time where I have to start fending for myself, getting all this proper things going? Da, da, da. So, but it's like, well, will we have the amenities of grocery stores for the next 6 years? Well, will this happen? Will this happen? It's like you start thinking about that rabbit hole. It's like maybe, but you can't sit there and stress about it. Just act on what you can control, and then the rest tends to work itself out, which is like something I've kind of noticed.
yeah. For me, it was like there were some people that chose community. They were like, we'll just work together. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to defend ourselves against ourselves. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? We'll
So
just
you can
work
work with
together and,
yeah.
and solve the things. So I kind, for me, enough people did that it really made me excited about the direction that life is going in.
Mm-hmm.
And very hopeful. And I think just being able to communicate my experience, that excites me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm at a different stage in my life now. Like I hit 50,
Mm-hmm.
so it's for me. It's like wow. It's like I lived a lot of my life, but I have that excitement of communicating some of my experience, and hopefully it's beneficial to especially to a younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily have to make the same mistakes, or they can gain from the experience and better it, or whatever it may be in that regard. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, my children, that excites me in life. My family,
Mm-hmm.
being married, that excites me, and so on and so forth. It's so those simple things, and experiences like Ramadan was, also as well,
Mm-hmm.
where you get the opportunity to connect with God, and as a community,
Yeah.
it's a nice, because everybody's like struggling. I've always loved that as a young person,
Mm-hmm.
where everybody's kind of moving in the
Mm-hmm.
same direction. It's
Yeah, like when you all go to prayer, you all
yeah,
go to tarawih, you go to the fasts, you break fast together as a family, and it's like you realize that you're not alone. But then you realize billions of people are doing this across the world, and
yeah.
then you realize even more like wow, like
Yeah,
this is like
that's an amazing thing what you just said right there. Like, if especially as Muslims, I think we should keep that in mind, that there's billions of people throughout the world, and everybody's keeping watch. So at one point in time the sun hits, we're praying
yeah,
then
yep,
they take their turn at another part of the world.
mm-hmm.
And everybody's taking their turns and remembering Allah. And then the same thing, when it comes to Ramadan and so on and so forth. And I think that if we keep that in mind above some of the differences that may be there, it allows us to see the beauty. It's
Mm-hmm.
important to see beauty in today's time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Like we were saying, it's
yeah.
so easy to see the negative because
Yes.
that's what the media says. Like the media puts negative. The content you see is also negative. So it's like important, like you said, to take a step back and be like, you know what? SubhanAllah, like look how beautiful this nature is. Look how beautiful this running water is. Look how beautiful it is that we have another day of life to
Right.
do something, to achieve something. And it's like you said, it's hard sometimes to do that, but it's what's needed to happen.
I came on this campus actually, and I was like, man, I was telling myself, I was actually talking to my wife too, and I was telling her, it's actually a beautiful campus.
Mm-hmm.
The setup is
Mm-hmm.
is really
There's
nice.
like a giant quad space. There's like everything's really pretty, beautiful. It was a beautiful day. So it's like when you have those moments, you're like, you know what? Like,
Life is good.
yeah, and it's like always appreciative. And like, it's easy to be like, when you're sad, it's easy to be sad. When you're happy, it's easy to be happy. But the trick is when you're happy, is to still be humble and appreciative. And when you're sad, to understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And it's like understanding how to control those emotions is like the sweet part about life. And I kind of want to go off that and ask to you, like, what is something you feel like you've done in life that you feel that you're proud of?
I think that I was able to, like I told you, I was a child of the '80s,
Mm-hmm.
and so I watched, specifically like the Puerto Rican and community in Philadelphia deteriorate, and I think that I'm happy that I was able to, survive a lot of that as well as others have. It's not all dark, but there was some challenges as a community, which is different than individuals.
And like your Puerto Rican community?
Yeah. When it becomes social, when you start seeing social problems, it's different than this particular individual or these couple families. Now it becomes a whole struggle. Just like you were saying in Egypt, like the poverty becomes a social issue. It's not just a couple families that is kind of more easy to help. So, working through that and then seeing, myself be able to, especially within the last 6-7 years, come back into my own community as a Muslim, after going through all of the changes that I have gone through and be able to help out. That's something that, that's something that was very, for me, I always wanted to do it since I was a child. So I kind of feel that part of my life, I accomplished that.
Yeah.
So that's something that has
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And I'm so, again, grateful to have met you and learned about this story, because to me it's so amazing to hear someone so experienced about it, and to be a bridge between the communities, to be that person is inspiring to a young Muslim like me. So then he's like, you know what, continue doing that, because then you could also be a bridge. And that's kind of the way of life. It's you're only as strong as the people around you, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. So it's make sure everyone is strong as a community together. So I just think that's an awesome purpose and stuff to have. So I just want to commend you for that. So, but so two things that I do on the Old Kanoli show, basically I always ask what's a word you want to learn in Arabic, and what's one of your favorite quotes. So I'll start with the favorite quote, because I just I love this, and it just kind of goes so well with our conversation. And it's, tell me who you hang with and I'll tell you who you are. Yeah. And I just kind of want you to kind of go in depth about that and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, we have that saying in Spanish as well. That has a lot to do with, the idea of the friends you choose. But I would say in today's time that we shouldn't take that so literal. Also, we also should hold ourselves accountable. What is it that we're seeing? What it is that we're spending time with, on social media? We have to ask ourselves, is that reflective of really who we are? To make that more of a self-reflective point, and use our content, or use what it is that we're putting out there as being reflective of who we are, and knowing that that's influencing somebody just like we're being influenced. That's in the kind of that digital, cyber analog to the idea of your friends, are a mirror of who you are. It's also the image that you're putting out there in your content. Remember that other people are, they're accompanying you on your journey. So, what crowd do you want to be attracted to you? You know what I'm saying?
And it's so amazing that you say that, because for me, I always love this quote because I believe it so wholeheartedly. But I really felt it when I started realizing I didn't have that many true friends that I could really rely on. Then I was like, okay, who are the people I rely on? Oh, these are the 5 people that I rely on. Okay, so out of these 5 people, how many of them is a business owner? Out of these 5 people, how many of them are religious? Out of these 5 people, how many of them have good relationships with people? Out of these 5 people, how many of them are ambitious? And when I started doing this, I started realizing, wait, all of them have these traits. So then what does that make me? I have to have some of those traits as well. Maybe not all of them, but I'd at least have some. And I started realizing that the more I worked on myself and bettered myself, the better my friends got. Because when you better yourself, you better the people around you. And when everyone's constantly bettering yourself within this circle, you all just kind of grow and make each other better and push each other to be better. And it's a sweet experience too that I got to feel as an athlete as well, was when I was in a team lift with the team and we're all lifting and everyone there is trying to actually be better. I noticed how we all played better. We all had this team camaraderie that was better. But when people kind of came in half energy, some people tried, some people didn't, it made the team like that as well. So I kind of realized that it really does matter how everyone handles a situation together as one. And then I feel like the better I've been the better people I've met. So it's when I go to a masjid and I start talking to people, being confident enough to, hey, let me talk to this really interesting guy who gave a khutbah after Tarawih prayer. Let me go talk to this person. Let me go talk to this person. And it made me realize that, wait, I'm attracting this energy, and this energy is attracted to me because I'm at that level now to attract these types of people. So it's I started realizing that firsthand as again, early 20s into mid 20s. You're wait, if I can keep this up, then I wonder how far I can go with this sense of growth. So I was kind of like, I just love that quote so much. I'm so grateful that you like said it, because it was just like, oh, when I read it, I was like, I love this quote. But and last thing I do is, what word do you want to learn in Arabic? And you chose the word unity. And it's funny because the word unity, like directly translated, is it was funny. I looked it up to make sure, but it was like wahda, which is like also kind of means one. So it's like unity is like wahda. So you can say it with me like wahda,
Wahda.
right? So it's like cool because like unity is like shows that you're together, but wahid means one, and then wahda is like you're all one, and that's what unity is that you're all the same human race. We're all people. We all have feelings. We all have these things that we share. So it's kind of cool that like kind of it's like cumulative of like our conversation so well that it's like, again, we're all one. We're all in this unity of like striving for success in life. We all want to be successful. We all want to be happy. But how do we get it there? We get there together. We get there as one. So I just kind of like love to see that. So I just want to thank you again, Yusuf, for joining me on the podcast.
The
And it was, of course, and it was just an insightful conversation, and your journey, your story is just awesome. So I'm so grateful for you having been here.
Yeah. Likewise, I'm grateful for the conversation and the experience.
Of course. So thank you guys again for tuning in to the Oli Kanoli Show. Today was an awesome conversation with Yusuf. So please leave a bunch of friendly comments down below. And if you have any questions about Islam, or if you're a convert or you're struggling, please feel free to reach out and leave a bunch of comments. Because again, this is the community we're building. So thank you guys again for tuning in to the Oli Kanoli Show, Yusuf. I'll see you next time. See you later.